Don't be so happy. because I tell you...
You know what? I got
something
something in here.
Make sure I'll get sleeping but I see what you just said. As a matter of fact, the point I wanted to present to you is that the reason that the Old Testament is full of so many mistakes and so many contradictions, some of them...
The Old Testament?
The New Testament is full of so many contradictions and so many mistakes is because the followers of Jesus, as you just said, were complete ignorant Jews. And he described his students who do not know Aleph Bet. And when you come to ignorant people that cannot be accepted to any yeshiva and ask them to falsify a book claimed to be from God, what do you expect? Every page has so many mistakes. Believe me, I have such a list here. I did not tell you maybe 10% of the things I wanted. Not that I thought that I'll be able to do everything in 2-3 hours, but I...
Yosef, you got a big problem there. I'll tell you what your problem is.
What?
The problem is, if these disciples of Jesus, the ones who wrote the New Testament, and granted they didn't graduate from any yeshivas, and they were unlearned, but if they were so laughable, how is it that Christianity took off? How is it that even many of the Pharisees followed what these foolish people were teaching, unless they were convinced that something miraculous, unless they were convinced that the hand of God was involved?
Very good. I'm glad you said it. And from your words, I'm going to prove to you that Judaism is the only valid religion. From what you just said. When I come to a crowd, and I try to convince them to be my students. And I start to gathering all the homeless people of the street, as he did, as you know, those ignorant that do not know anything anyway, and gather them to be students and have himself a cult. When I come, and this is my goal, what kind of religion I'll design to these people? An easy religion to practice that everybody will jump and say, hey, we're with you. 100%, everything is allowed. Or I will design a religion that is so complicated, so difficult to keep. What will be an easier job for me? To come and tell them, for instance, one of the times the student told him, you told us that we're not allowed to violate any rules of the Torah. So how come you eat bread without washing your hands, without netilat yadayim? They asked him, those ignorant challenged him. So he said, he started to curse the rabbis. But in another page, as I mentioned before, he told his students, make sure you follow the instructions of the servants of Moshe, the sages, because they have it from generation to generation. So now, you just say that you must listen to the rabbis. Those are the ones who keep the Torah of Moses alive. And when the student asks you why you yourself don't listen to them, he started to curse them. Or when he told them that they're not allowed to violate the rules of the Sabbath, the next day student came and they wanted to cut wheat on the Sabbath. And he started to see that they're getting angry at him. So he told them, I allow you today to cut weeds. Why? I am the master of the Sabbath. Come on. You just say in the book of Matthew, as I mentioned before, no one is allowed to contradict one little law. And if he does, he is going to be cursed
Yosef,
by God.
I'm sure
just allow them to violate one of the most important rules of God.
See, I'm sure they would like to hear my explanation.
Please?
I'm sure they would.
Please. You're cutting me in a nice way, I surrender.
I'll always try to be nice.
No problem.
What Jesus did, he never said, you don't have to follow the law, or the law is not important. And that's why Yosef is correct. He told the people to follow those in leadership. He did nothing. He wasn't a revolutionary. He did nothing to try to undermine the authority. But what he did do was point out that their interpretation of the law wasn't an accurate interpretation. You see, the religious leaders would criticize Jesus for healing on the Sabbath. And Jesus pointed out that they were hypocrites. Why? because they did many things themselves on the Sabbath. They would water their animals. They would assist with the birth of their animals. The priests would minister on the Sabbath. And so he understood correctly, and the religious Jews of the day should also have been able to understand that there are certain commandments that are more important than others, that it is justified if somebody is starving to death to pick food on the Sabbath day.
Wait, please. I used an example that is the worst sin in Judaism. Cutting weeds on the Sabbath is one of the 39 laws that we're not allowed to do on the Sabbath. You want the proof? I'll give you the proof.
Okay, let's see it. Let's see it.
I give you the proof. Comes a person named Slofchad. You read in the Old Testament, Slofchad. He went on the first Sabbath after accepting the Torah, and he started to pull weeds, trash from the ground, and Moses didn't know what to do with him. He took him and put him in jail. He asked God, this is what he did. What should I do with him? God came and told him, execute him in front of the entire nation, leman iru v'irau, that a person like this have no right to live. And Jesus, as I mentioned before, and you agree with me, I'm not bringing sources that are not exist, and it says he allowed his student to do what Slofchad did. Now you just said no one is allowed to contradict the Torah, and you allow them to do something that the Torah say that it's death penalty. And when they told you, how are you allowing us such a thing? You say, I am the master of the Sabbath. You have to make up your mind. If you're the master of the Sabbath, that means God does not exist. You are a new God. The Torah is not true. If you come and say the Torah is the word of God, be very careful not to modify it, and you come and start changing it according to your need every day, then not only you're not the Messiah, you're not even a student.
Are you allowed to defend yourself on the Sabbath? Are you allowed to minister in the temple on the Sabbath?
Not to the point.
But what is the point on this?
The point is, can I come to one of my students that's sitting here, and he tell me, please, I'm going to lose $1 million if I'm not going to cut my weeds tomorrow because on Sunday there's a huge storm. I want to take my workers only tomorrow, Rabbi, I'm begging you. Please let me cut my weeds because I'm going to lose $5 million. Whatever the case is. Do you know in history, before Jesus, after Jesus, any rabbi that kept what Jesus suggested, not to move an inch from the Torah, that will have the guts to come and tell a student you're allowed to cut the weeds on the Sabbath? It's such a violation.
But wouldn't you admit that there are exceptions?
Yes, exceptions.
Wouldn't you admit that there are some more important?
Pikuach nefesh, only life risk. There is only one exception to the law. If a person is in a life threat, such as pregnant woman, she may get into problems, complications, or a person needs a hospital, we are the Jews driving on a Sabbath, or if we need to light fire to save the life of a Jew, even if we're not sure he has high fever, just there's a 1% chance that a person is going to die, comes the Torah and say, the laws were given for us to live, thanks to them, not to die.
How about circumcising a child on the 8th day and violating the Sabbath? Okay. Which comes first?
Comes the Torah in a clear sentence and told us that we are allowed to do it on the 7th day. And if you know, in the chapter 19 of the Talmud, the Mishnah, Perek 19, the Rabbi Eliezer, asking this question, and has about 2 pages with proofs and verses from the Torah. How do we know that we're allowed to circumcise the baby in the 8 days? And you asked before about the oral laws, and maybe that's the time for me to respond to your question. You have to use common sense, which is very simple. What's the common sense? God brings the Jews in front of Mount Sinai and gives them the written Torah. The written Torah say Torahs. You disagree with me, but we'll take it further. Now tell me, if God comes to millions of people, remember, they're 1,300 years before Christianity, so there's no argument yet. The argument will start 1,300 years later, but at this point, everybody see that event. Comes God and say to the Jews, here is the Torah I'm giving you, and the Jews listening to Moses speaking. How do we know? nobody would be interested to take such a difficult religion to keep. So many laws, changing their lifestyle completely, unless if what the Torah says is the truth. So when I read about myself that God spoke to Moses, I'm a witness. If it's not true, I will say, Mr. Moshe, there's a mistake in the book.
May I? That's a good point. It's a good point. It's a very good point.
I will give you the time, but give me another minute. Comes the Torah to Moshe and say, there come one Jew and say to the crowd, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, anybody heard here God speaking to Moses and giving him authority to be the leader? Please raise his hand. We are not interested to get it. We are free people. We want to do whatever we want. Like today, people don't want to be religious. What made millions of people all of a sudden became 100% strict and follow the rules? The fact that they heard God. Now, you may come and say, well, how do we know about the oral laws? Very simple. If you search in the entire written Torah, there are 613 laws. Not in one place the Torah gave instructions, the written Torah, the Torah never gave instructions for people how to follow this mitzvah, this commandment.
Which one?
All of them. The 613 laws that describe in the Torah, without the oral laws, there is no way to understand one law. Such, I'll give you an example. The Torah says you have to circumcise a male born on the 8th day. You should cut the orla. We know what we cut when we circumcise a baby. Now, if we wouldn't have the oral laws, right, when Moses bring down the Torah, people will say, what you brought us, Chinese book? Okay, God say you should not cut the orla. What's orla? Mordechai would say, orla it's this. He would say, orla it's this. She would say, orla it's the nails. He will say, Moses, what's orla? There's no oral Torah according to your opinion. What's orla? Where we have to cut? God said that if we don't cut it, we're not Jews. We want